大家好，我是陈皮谈，挑战从零开始入职硅谷公司远程开发者第4集。今天主要学习内容是if语句，包括条件判断、if 语句、if else 语句、if else 语句以及 if 语句 for 循环的结合。下面是英文概述。Programming often involves examining a set of conditions and deciding which action to take based on those conditions. Python's if statements allows us to examine the current state of a program and respond appropriately to that state. First, I learned the conditional tests. At the heart of every if statement is an expression that can be evaluated as true or false, and is called a conditional test. Python uses the values true and false to decide whether the code in an if statement should be executed. If the conditional test evaluates to true, Python executes the code following the if statement. If the test evaluates to false, Python ignores the code following the if statement. And we use double equal sign to check for equality. And test for equality is case sensitive in Python. That's to say, two values with different capitalization are not considered equal. If case matters, this behavior is advantageous. But if case doesn't matter and instead you just want to test the value of a variable, we can convert the variable's value to lowercase just before doing the comparison. We can also use an exclamation point and an equal sign to check for inequality. The exclamation point represents not, and we can also use keywords and or to check multiple conditions. We can also use keywords in or not in to check whether a value is in or not in a list. After learning how to use conditional tests, I learned how to write if statements. There are several different kinds of if statements, and we can decide which to use depends on the number of conditions we want to test. The simplest kind of if statement is that only have one test and one action. And if else statements is similar to the simplest if statement, but it has an else statement which allows us to define an action or sets of actions that are executed when the conditional test fails. And there is if, elif, else statements when we need to test more than two possible situations, and to evaluate this, we can use Python's if, elif, else syntax. And one more thing, we can use as many elif blocks as we like, and we can also omit the else block in if elif statements, resulting in if elif statements. That's to say, Python does not require an else block at the end of an if elif chain. Sometimes it's useful and clear to use an additional elif statement. Finally, we also learned how to use statements with lists. We can watch for special values that need to be treated differently than other values in the list by combining if statements with lists. And sometimes we should check if a list is not empty before using that item in the list by using if statement. That's all today. Thanks for watching.